999, what's your emergency?
My mommy and Jeffrey are having a fight. Could you just send the police, please? They're having a fight because this has been going on forever and ever. But he's hurting Mom.
When he starts shouting, I hold my sister's hand to make us feel better.
I can't close my eyes because I see bad things. I don't think anyone believes me, but I know the truth.
It is my job to protect everyone. If Dad comes back, I'm the man of the house now.
When the fighting happened, it was always my job to call 999 for Mummy if it got really bad. Once I thought Mummy was dead, even though Daddy's left now. I can still hear the fighting in my head.
Get up them stairs right now before I teach you some manners, you cheeky little brat.
After Daddy left, I felt safe again, but then I was worried about Mummy.
Family First has been brilliant with the hard to reach families. I suppose working from a statutory agency, a lot of the families that we are engaged with don't want the service from social services but are very keen to take up the service from Women's Aid, who they see as a voluntary organisation who are there to help them. So that has been really good at bridging the gap, I think, between statutory and voluntary, and also us working together to provide the best services together for the families that need them at the time.
We are always worried about Mum getting hurt.
I find it hard to talk to anyone. I didn't ever feel safe.
I struggle to control my anger.
The partnership has been wonderful from day one, really, in that Women's Aid approached us and said, we identify a need within your world and within your services, and they absolutely did. Women that were getting refuge services were getting a top class service, but the women who chose to live in the community and didn't want to live in the refuge weren't getting the same level of service. So it was just brilliant that actually that had been identified. The other thing was really, and maybe that was hard to take at the time, but it was identified that because we weren't able to provide the services, that we were taking children into care when actually there could be, with the services that were being provided through this scheme, that we had the chance to actually work these families and keep them at home without removing the kids. And that has been so good going forwards and has meant that a lot of families have been able to stay together. And from a statutory perspective, we wouldn't have been able to give the input to do that. But working alongside Family First, it has meant that that has been possible, and we've been able to work families that are, or work with children that are at high risk, but actually with the significant input from Family First, it has meant that we've been able to manage that risk and keep those families at home. Which has just been great and is where those kids should be if at all possible.
I feel that the relationship that we have with staff is really important, and it's something that works really well. I'm conscious the project has won a regional award for the partnership working. There's regular communication with the members of the team. They attend meetings with us, with family support reviews, child protection case conferences. We're involved in planning through regular reviews of the project with their management, and it's a relationship that has gone from strength to strength, and something that we hope will continue in the years ahead. I know that mothers in particular find it really helpful when somebody is coming to the home and providing a project within the home. The fact that that particular worker works with mum, also works with the children, is really beneficial too. As opposed to traditionally, there might have been somebody working with the children, somebody working with a mum, and that would have been very segregated, but this is quite integrated, and it's huge benefits for the family, and it helps to reduce the risks and increase safety around the family unit. I suppose if a mum is equipped and her capacity is built up again from maybe feeling quite low after experience of domestic violence, the children are always going to benefit because they've got a mother who is able and more capable around them. I think it also helps that their safety is increased around the house as well, because mum was equipped with the right responses and making the appropriate steps to ensure the children's safety, that they're not put back into a situation where those children are at risk again. And I suppose for children, when they're in a more settled environment, a more stable environment where they're not being exposed to all that, is going to help them with their own resilience as they move forward.
For us, really, on the ground in Children's Social Services, we really benefit the input and the partnership that we have with our colleagues in the Families First project. We see the benefit of having one worker who works within that whole family unit. They work with the mummy and with the children. They're able to work with us to tailor the programme to the specific needs of that family, whether that be work on self-esteem, the educative work on what domestic abuse is, as well as helping with the practical side of things in terms of home conditions, getting children into school, having them in on time and prepared, those kind of things that make such a difference to children in their day-to-day lives.
There's good relationships between the social work teams and the Family First team. There's individual workers for each geographical area, so that means that those connections can be made and sustained, and those professional working relationships can develop through joint visits, through telephone calls, through the monthly report that social workers get, which can go on the family's file, really just indicating the work that's been completed in that month and the difference that's being made to the families. We are in the Trust now rolling out with Signs of Safety as a model of intervention with families. It's very much about working openly and transparently with the families, but also with their wider network, and the staff from Families First can also be part of that network and be professionally involved. And ultimately our aim is to safeguard children, but Women's Aid, we find, are the agency with bespoke expertise around the issue of domestic violence, and yet domestic violence pervades so much of the social work task really with the families that we work with, and it can increase risk for children, but Women's Aid, we find, understand that cycle of violence. They have many years experience and much to bring to the table really in terms of trying to get women on board to see the levels of risk they were exposing themselves and their children to.
It's a partnership approach project with Women's Aid and Social Services for women and children who have lived with domestic violence in the home place. Its purpose is to advocate with and for women and children working in partnership with social services to provide positive outcomes.
Domestic violence is not acceptable in any form and no one should have to tolerate it. But as we know, some of the biggest victims of domestic violence are the smallest. Every child living in a domestic violence home is in need of protection and support. The effect of domestic violence on children may be different to that of a mum or a sibling. They may experience intense feelings of fear and uncertainty, and they may feel that the situation is wrong but they're unable to do anything about it. With domestic violence, there's a significant risk of increase in harm to children's emotional, physical, psychological, social development. Family First is to support some of these issues. Children can overhear or witness the abuse, for example, a child sitting on the stairs or sitting up in the room. They can possibly intervene to protect a mum or a sibling and get hurt in the process, or for example a child in a mum's arms while she's being physically assaulted. Children can be used as a pawn or they can be colluding in the violence without even realising that they're doing it. For example, where's mum been today, who's she been with, what's she been doing? Depending on the nature and the frequency and the intensity of the violence, but also on the individual child, will determine how well that child copes and overcomes with the violence, and also the impact on their overall health and well-being. So staff understand and appreciate that domestic violence is a journey. We try to help families and meet them on their journey and support them on their way through it.
So when a family is referred to our service, we would usually do a joint visit with the social worker to their home. This would be to ease the introductions for the family and also just to sort of establish that we work in partnership together. Family First support worker would be a kind of bridge really between the family and the social worker. So at that initial visit, we would usually work with the mum and look at her existing strengths to see how we can build on those. That would be working towards the children's safety and well-being and ultimately empowering her to be the best parent that she can be. The type of support that we would offer would be very practical and bespoke for each family. So for example, if a child was struggling with sleep routine, we could help with maybe getting the family new bedding, a night light, creating a safe space for the child. We would look with mum at things like behaviour management, also budgeting. We help them with healthy eating as well, and also just encouraging positive play and family activities together.
Everybody has worries and helps me to get them to go away.
I still love my dad, though he is safer without him in the house.
Family First also offer a lot of emotional support to ladies, so we would be helping mums to look at things like the cycle of violence and the impact that domestic violence has had on their children. Sometimes we just help them emotionally in conversations, just through support or even accompanying them at case conferences as well. So support workers also offer one-to-one therapeutic work with children, and that would be about helping them to keep themselves safe and also just giving them an opportunity to talk with somebody about any worries that they might have.
I was a bit scared meeting the Family First worker, but she was really nice and she had a friendly face. We did fun things together, like making stuff, and she taught me about OO sounds. So now I know what my body does if I get scared and who to talk to. She has definitely helped Mummy too. At home now, there is happiness.
So we can see such a huge positive impact that this project has on children. One of the big things that it does really is to help to bridge the gap between the social worker and the child and the mummy as well. It helps to promote that positive relationship where the child is maybe thinking that the social worker is a wee bit less scary and that's saying that the social worker is there to help. It's helping to encourage the child to get their thoughts and feelings across so that we understand what's going on for them as well. We're also seeing a real positive impact on the relationships within that household between the children and their mummies. And we're seeing, I suppose, the impact then that the increased awareness and knowledge of domestic abuse has on a family's ability to protect themselves.
It's empowering women and working alongside women in their own home to deliver that programme, really ultimately to make a difference to the children. So Women's Aid working with those mums ultimately has such a positive impact upon the children and reduces the risk, which also then meets the needs of the statutory agency in terms of reducing from maybe a threshold of child protection down to family support or really towards case closure, which is what we aim to do. We've been able to work so closely together really has helped each of the respective agencies from the Trust and Women's Aid to understand one another's role better and really I suppose from the Trust perspective to value the input and the expertise of Women's Aid and of the skills of their staff and working alongside our families. So this is a mechanism by which to ensure the families get the very best quality of service and that ultimately we're all working together to safeguard the children and for the same aim to reduce that level of risk to them.
The cost of children coming into care is one thing, the financial cost, and you're probably talking well over 200,000 a year, but it's much more than that. You know, the philosophy of the Trust, as with Family First, is very much that children should be at home in their families and cared for safely in their families. And if we can do that, we as society have an obligation, and as the Trust and the government have an obligation to keep children at home. So as well as the actual financial cost, it is the right thing to be doing unless the line is so high or the risk is so high we can't do that. So the cost of a worker at 13,000 a year as opposed to bringing a child into care at 200,000 a year, it's a drop in the ocean. But it's a drop in the ocean financially, but also from the benefit of keeping children in families and everything that care can do to children, and all of the research around that is just something that we don't want for children. If at all, it can be avoided. And actually, with the support of Family First, it can be avoided, and we've shown that.
you to be happier when the morning comes and see that we become. In the cold light of day, in the flame in the way, the fire we begun. Every argument, every worry